welcome. Let's see, got it. So welcome everybody. It gives me great joy, great pleasure to see so many of you here, both new faces and well-known faces. And this is our last and fourth National Danish Book Club, which is made possible by Merida Lorm and Scandesign and Northwest Danish Association, where Line is the representative. And I am so happy to have been able to do this now 4 times. We are going to continue in the spring with another 5 new books. And I can warn you already that the one I picked for January, it's a must read, but it's very long. But once you get entangled in its amazing web of stories, you simply can't put it down. So I hope that I'll see a lot of you again, because I was saying to Line when she told me that a lot of people had signed up, oh, this is the shortest book yet. So maybe that was the reason, but of course I'd like to say something. No, it's a great book. So from me, welcome, and my colleague and partner in crime here, Desiree, would like to make an announcement too.
Well, I just wanted to add that we have an interview with the writer of next month's, what did I say? I'm a little tired, sorry. We have an interview in the books. So I think it's going to be super interesting. And so I'm looking forward to it. I started reading the book, and like you say, I had a hard time putting it down. So it's 750 pages, I think. So we should get started now.
Yes, that's why I picked it for after Christmas, because then people would have lots of time, because it's so many different stories. You're following 3 generations of people from his hometown, which is Marstal on the island of Ærø. But let's move back, yes, close to Katamina, right? But let's move back to our book tonight. So I chose not to start.
What's the name of the book?
So I'm excited.
It's We the Drowned, Vi de Druknede. And of course, I'll try to find, I've already found it online for free, for a free download, as I try to do every time. So I'll send the link to Line and she will share it. So I decided against giving you a formal introduction to Karen Blixen. She has 2 pseudonyms, Isaac Dinesen and Pierre Andresel. And notice that they're both males. She is so well described online. You can read everything about her if you want to. And if you want to hear about her story, her love affair with Danish Finch Hatton, potentially love affair, and Out of Africa, that is one of her very famous books where Meryl Streep tried incredibly hard to kind of do a Danish accent. I don't think she succeeded, but that's just me being critical. But so Karen Blixen is a great, great writer. And as we were talking about, Line said, oh, the Danish was a little bit old. And yes, but if you read some of her other books, like the Gothic Tales, or, you know, Tales, Anecdotes of Destiny, the Danish is ancient in that sense. It's very heavy, but it's a choice of hers. She chose to write in that way. She lived, and I did write that down, she lived from 1885 to 1962. And if you go to Denmark, you can go to her house. That was the house of her parents. Her mother was an aristocrat and her dad was kind of wanderer. He was in Wisconsin, and under the name of Boganis, he wrote about his meetings with the native inhabitants of the time, and he actually also created a few children, so they're still descendants of her father in Wisconsin. He also committed suicide, which was very important in her life when she was 10, so very comparable to Sylvia Plath, if you know that famous poet. So anyway, her mother was an aristocrat. She had this wonderful house in Rungsted called Rungsted Lund, north of Copenhagen. And today it is a beautiful museum for Karen Blixen. You can go there, you can see where she sat and wrote. You can also wander around the rooms. You can wander in the garden where she is buried. And finally, right now in Denmark, they are showing a movie called Pagten. And I actually don't know what it is in English. It's the treaty or something. I don't know how they translated that, but it is written and based on a book by a Danish, very famous poet called Thorkild Bjørnvig. He wrote a book called Pagten about his relationship, alliance, you could almost say, with Karen Blixen. And that is showing right now in Denmark. So if you want to know more about that part of her life after she returned to Denmark and settled in her mother's home and stayed there for the rest of her life, then that is also a way for you to find out more about her. So as a person, she's fascinating. And the reason I started out my questions for you with, she calls herself a storyteller, is that there's also a movie out about with her called Karen Blixen Storyteller. So go explore if you're interested in her universe. But let me return to that first question. Maybe that could be the start. How do you perceive this story? Because I also said, really, what's it about? So it is, as usual, a very, very open discussion. And I sincerely hope you would like to share your points of view. We have 50 minutes to share and discuss. And everybody, you can raise your hand or you can start talking and we'll try to figure it out with so many people and still hear what everybody has to say. So, like I said, the story, how do you perceive it? What's it about? If that's a good place to start for you, let's start right there. I'm throwing it at you.
I don't know.
Yes, Ingrid.
Well, it's a wonderful vignette from that west coast of Denmark and the lifestyle. I've seen that depicted in other movies, but I find that really fascinating. That harsh environment, the harshness of their food. You know, they had such humble foods, but they were to enjoy that and celebrate it through, you know, and eschewing pleasure. The environment invited eschewing pleasure because it was so harsh. It still is harsh. I know that environment in Denmark very much. And so Karen Blixen, which is funny because she's from, was she from Fyn? No, I can't remember right now. But she wouldn't have known that environment except through books, I would think. So that's what I wanted to talk about. That aspect is the environment, and that this religion and the harshness of it was fascinating to me.
And Inge, you did realize that the movie is placed in Denmark and the book is placed in Norway. And that's when you say, why?
I'm sorry, I did not know it was in Norway. I have only read English, but so anyway, no, please let me know that. I didn't know that.
But it's, of course, what you're focusing on, the environment, the harshness, is also, of course, typical of Norway. Also a fishing nation. They would be dependent on the fishermen coming and going and getting their harvest, and they would definitely also be victims of, well, the temperament of the sea. So yeah, so it's a really good point to bring up that she is contrasting the harshness of the environment with the spiritual life that needs to be their nutrition in this harsh environment. Desiree?
Yeah, some people say that the reason why she moved to Norway, or moved the story to Norway, is that she was afraid that it was going to be too harsh on the Danes if it took place in Denmark. She didn't want that critique. I don't know whether it's true, but I like to think of the story as interesting because I think there are many, many layers, but I think it's interesting that she uses a male name, but she poses herself, I think, as the artist and the one who can bring the true meaning to people's lives through her literature. And what I'm talking about is that I think it's very clear that Babette, that ties to between Babette and Isak Dinesen, aka Karen Blixen. But I also think we could read it in a very contemporary way about sustainability, over-consuming food that's not local. We can read it in a biblical sense. We can read it in a post-colonial lens, or through a lens that's post-colonial. There's so many rich ways we could interpret this text. It's very interesting. I think there's so many ways we could go about this.
Yes. Does anyone want to pick up on one? Yes, Otto.
Yeah, I am struck by the religious themes in the book, and so I don't know if there's one correct answer. What is the book about? But that religious theme plays a huge role in there, and I think you could connect it actually to Søren Kierkegaard, and talk about owning yourself, be a true follower of your own sentiment, and what Kierkegaard said, be a true Christ follower. And maybe those two things in some ways overlap here. Because by the way, I think we should have done this on the 15th of December, because that's a very significant day where the old prophets has his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe,
So true.
and maybe we should have little snacks with us when we do this. So, but the religious theme, back to that, I worked in spiritual care for many years, and have seen both the positive and the negative aspects of religion, and also how the non-religious can live a life much more in tune with other people and the essence of who they are, and going for kindness and all these other things that we find throughout the different religions in life. That's sort of where I'm looking at the book from.
Oh, but I think that's wonderful. Can I just pick up on your Kierkegaard reference? Because I agree with you. One of Kierkegaard's most famous books was Either Or.
Yes.
Where he said, you can't do both. You have to choose. And in his mind, you had to choose between being an aesthetic kind of person, an ethical kind of person, or a Christian kind of person. So it was more or less walking up the steps towards salvation, and the best stage. It's his, where people talk about the stages of Kierkegaard. But it seems to me that Karen Blixen is not doing that same distinction and making the choice. She says, you can do both. And I base that on the fact that when Laurent Löwenhjelm in the beginning says, I have learned tonight that in this world, there are things that are not possible. That is changed towards the end, at the end, to tonight I have learned that everything in this world is possible. And I think that is where she's embracing something other than Kierkegaard's kind of, you have to choose.
Well, it's interesting also that that the last speech, the speech that he gives at the dinner, has a lot to do with, it's about grace. Yes. And you see grace as an inter-religious phenomenon, not boxed in by these experiences or whatever that the prophet has converted people to. And by the way, the grace is a key element in the Lutheran religion. So I think it is in some ways Karen Blixen's own struggle with religion and non-religion.
Okay, everybody, what do you think? Is it a struggle? Is it resolved? How does she resolve it? Is this book about religion? Is it the Last Supper, the Eucharist? Is that what we see with the 12 people around the table and all being elevated to heights that they had never seen before? Or is it a witch's Sabbath with demons? It can be, how do you say it? I would love some reactions to that question about that Otto is raising here about religion. England, you want to start? Oh, Laurie, sir, you went first, then England afterwards.
Yeah, I love this story so much. And my father was a minister, so I come into these kinds of conversations with giant chips on both of my shoulders and kind of my fists up a little bit, because I think I spent a little bit too much time in the church as a child. But to me, this story from my heart, it's an anecdote, it's an antidote, it's a balm. It heals me from some of the more painful aspects of growing up in a very heavily churched household. One of the things that's always frustrated me about the story of Jesus is that he died when he was 33. And I've always said anybody can be nice until they're 33. I would be much more interested in Christ as my savior if he actually lived to like 75 and had annoying children and had to pay taxes all the time to a government that he didn't like. And so, but what I love about this story is you have all these people who are of a certain age, and they've all had hard things in their lives, and they've taken the paths they felt they were supposed to take, and it hasn't worked for a single one of them, but they are united by this woman who, just, I keep on thinking of the turtle whenever I think of Babette. You know, this it's captured by the sea and from the sea in a net. And I think it was Otto who said the word grace. And in this they think they've been walking the right path, and clearly they are all in pain of one sort or another, and they've cut themselves off from different pieces of their hearts, and then they have communion together, and they all let all of that go, and it falls away. And yeah, so I'm ready for the Church of Babette.
Yeah, I
and
wanted
it's
to add
Oh, I'm
something.
sorry. Linda?
I wanted to
You
add
were
that,
saying
yes,
something? Linda.
I wanted to add that, yes, I considered the feast a communion, a real spiritual communion. And it was in contrast to me with the, well, for me, excessively structured and controlling aspect of the religion. Now, it did create a community. On the other hand, when the women, young girls, were courted, for him to say that, you know, to take one of my daughters is to cut off a hand, I found that very shocking. And it really made me feel that it was out of control, his controlling this. Do you understand? I thought that Babette's feast was wonderful. I felt it was very spiritual.
It's also, to me, what both you and Linda and Laurie were saying. Laurie, you were saying that nobody was really having a full life. And she repeatedly says in the book that the two daughters always have a peaceful visage. They have the solemnity of knowing their place, of knowing that they belong, of knowing that they do good. And so I think also we're interpreting, hey, but one could have had a family and a home with Lawrence Löwenhielm, and the other could have been a famous singer. So we're also projecting our own kind of thoughts about, oh, this might be the fulfillment of life where they've chosen to totally, I'm just going to be my dad's daughter. And that is an interesting aspect. Okay, so England, you took down your hand. Did you not want to say anything? Because then you were afterwards TLC Nielsen.
Yes, it was just a simple thought that I think for me, Kahn Blixen Isaac is asking the reader to resolve this tension between the folks who are living for the next life and the ones who are celebrating this one. You know, both have a service aspect to the life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a beauty perhaps in Martina and Philippa and what their devotion was, but of course Babette brings this other worldly beauty and devotion. So that's it.
And do you all know that in Denmark, there were two separate ways of looking at religion? One was inner mission, and those were the pietists, and that is this sect. Inner mission was all about negating all the joys of this world and simply looking ahead to the world to come. No dancing, no drinking, no alcohol, well, no tobacco, no joy, just praying. And on the other hand, we had the Grundtvigians, and Grundtvig was definitely, well, he enjoyed life. He had 12 kids, and he was a minister, and he was filled with, let's live, let's learn, let's educate, let's enjoy life. And those were the two, and they were very much back to what we talked about with the harsh conditions. The inner mission were the harsh condition people. The Grundtvigians were the happy farmers who were safe and secure and had enough money and enough food. That's also what
Are you
she
talking about
portrayed.
Lutheranism? Is this Lutheranism you're talking about?
Yes,
the two
they're all
different aspects of Lutheranism.
Yeah,
Okay.
because in 1536, Denmark was Lutheranized at the Reformation, and that was when, and really, I mean, the king wanted all the lands owned by the Catholic Church, which was about a third of the land, you know, in the country at the time. So he happily embraced the Lutheran Reformation. TLC, what is your name? It's not TLC.
It's Tracy.
Tracy, hi Tracy.
Hi. Yes, my husband and I are just back from a trip to Denmark where we met some new family members. He's been doing a lot of heritage work, so it's interesting to tie that, to hear those comments as I reflect on this book. But I really do kind of look at it as a Christian allegory, and Ingrid's points were very the things I was kind of thinking about as well. Just that, well, in America too, like as I've done my family heritage, my family left England because of the religious persecution, and they came over and they were more Puritans. So it's interesting that this echoes in Denmark, it echoes in America, in the dance of grace. So yeah, I found it interesting. But the quote that I pulled up on my Kindle is as Babette is introduced by letter by the opera singer. And he writes, "In paradise, I shall hear your voice again. There you will sing without fears or scruples as God meant you to sing. There you will be the great artist that God meant you to be. Ah, how you will enchant the angels." And that comes full circle at the end as the sisters talk to Babette about her skills and as a cook. So yeah, I just thought it doesn't answer questions, but it raises them. And I think it's incredibly well written and leaves a lot to chew on as you digest it.
Right. So what you're saying, Trace, is also that, yes, we do have the religion. We have that oppressive religion Lori is explaining, and that chip on your shoulder too, but we also have it as an enjoyment of their life. The question is, did you all pick up on why do they both, well, reject the suitors? If you watch the movie, and I know some of you have, then you see those suitors kind of wandering after them when they go to church on Sundays. But in the book, it's just the two. It's just Löwenhjelm and Achille Papin who comes and are the suitors. Why do they reject it? Especially with Philippa. We do have a little bit of a clue. I don't know if you picked up on that, anybody, where we read that maybe Philippa was a little bit worried about what was going on in herself. So maybe that budding, ooh, there is a world and a life outside of this little tiny community, that is a feeling that needs to be batted down and vanquished by these sisters. So maybe there's also that spiritual versus the more, well, everyday life that we might embrace in those hints. Linda?
Well, I think that I got from that particular moment, the concept of the 7 deadly sins, that she went, aha, vanity, vanity. No, let me just not be vain. Yes, it's a thought, but she tamped it down fast. That she wasn't going to go for it, even though the artistry would have been profound, a great opera singer. No, the vanity that comes along with it wouldn't be in alignment with, well, who she was for the most part as a member of this community.
And does anyone want to comment on that and vanity and Laurence Löbjev in his second appearance? So Debbie, I'm sorry, was that where you were going to go?
No, one of the things that struck me is the thought that, you know, a mind once expanded cannot be contracted. And the same thing with a heart once expanded cannot be contracted. And I think that when their minds and their hearts and their emotions began to kind of crack open a little bit, that it scared them and they shut it back down, you know, as quickly as they could. And I found that to be both sad, but also, you know, that's how they were raised. They were raised to be there and be those girls. And I mean, if they left the village, who would be left, really?
Yeah, that's right. Desiree?
Yeah, I think you were hinting at before when Felipe is sort of dating, when she has these lessons. The quote is in my version, it's page 28. She did not imagine that her sister might have been surprised and frightened by something in her own nature. So something has been like awakened, and it's when you, I mean, I can't help but thinking that the meal is also, it's so close to the sexual act. This is something we can smell and taste, and like we consume it in the same, it raises so many emotions, and there's so many different senses that are triggered, both when we are in a physical sexual relationship and when we consume food. And in that sense, that's what the whole table is going through, but maybe mostly the sisters, I don't know. And then after, they have this cleansing feeling, right? They are like white lambs, and Babette is completely exhausted and white as it goes. And like, maybe it likens the feelings you have right after a gigantic orgasm, right? It's the same kind of feelings that I think she's playing with, Karen Blixen, and it's so interesting, I think. So yeah. And
no,
also,
and
yeah.
No, sorry, that's right.
So I just want to add that I don't think this reading is way super duper off. Also, the old couple, you know, there's so many other things. It's not just the sisters. There's so many other things that go full circle, and where, you know, some of the tension goes away and everyone is just like giddy and happy after the meal, right?
And the colors. You say Babette is totally pale, right? But she's surrounded by lots and lots of black pots and pans. And I think that that's important because, again, we're all sitting here and just having a really nice time with religion. And now you're adding a little bit of sexuality. But there is also the demonic, I would argue, in the text. When we have the turtle, when we have that Pythia, and if you don't know who Pythia is, she's the one from the Oracle of Delphi. And she's sitting on this 3-legged chair, and the little red-haired boy is called the familiar of Babette. So we do have hints at that. Did anyone think about whether that is it a destructive demon, or is Babette really a true artist, a religious artist? Or is she also, and may I add another aspect, a pétroleuse? Is she also a class warrior, warring against that aristocracy that appreciated her art? Do we also have a class battle in this book? Or is that, what do you think? Is that She okay, so Ingrid is writing. Yeah, she struggled with the same tension. So does anyone want to go down that path, the demon, the demonic, or the class struggle that might also be said to be present in the book? Is that something anybody else felt, or am I
Yes.
alone?
The class struggle, because as much as she was, Babette was up in the barricades, these were the people she fed and her patrons, actually. So yes, there was definitely a thread of class struggle going through this.
And how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile feeding your oppressors? How do you reconcile the fact that they are the only ones who actually appreciate her? Lorenz Löwenhjelm, when he's the only one who recognizes everything, he is recognizing it because he is at the court. And again, notice he has been exploiting the pious sentences and phrases of the minister and the daughters to gain his ascendancy in that court system. So is that okay? Is it okay to be kind of, like I said, reconciling your class struggle with an acceptance of the fact that the class that you're struggling with feeds you? Did anyone see the political aspects or have any comments on that? Because I thought that they were very interesting, that they also confront her with it at the end, where they say, but all those names you're mentioning that are no longer in Paris, they were the ones that killed your husband and your son. And she says, yes, but they were raised to appreciate me.
Absolutely. I saw that, Netta. And I was also struck by that. And what occurred to me is that those who appreciate us are not necessarily those who love us. And so she was struggling against that in that dialogue, I felt.
That's a
But
really good.
didn't she also say that, in essence, that because she could give them her art and make them appreciate her, that in essence she owned them?
Mhm.
That she owned them because that she had them in her power.
And is that what happens when we read literature? Does the author own us when we are totally engrossed in a book, when it starts thoughts that we would not have otherwise? Is that what happens? That's a really good point, Lynn. She owned them. Yes, they were her people. And we also hear that, of course, the only person that this captain would duel for would be this cook, this chef. So is that what happens? And maybe I can use that as a segue to words, because words are also in the book. And maybe that owning is also related to speech. I don't know if you thought about that, but it's as if women are silent and men are speaking in the book. The minister speaks, the men speaks, Lorenz Löwenhjelm speaks, and yet Babette speaks with the most, well, the loudest voice of all when she's creating her art through food. I don't know if you saw that. It's as if she's nurturing the people with her food, not with her words. Her Norwegian is flawed and she still gets her way. I don't know if any of you thought about speech as also a way to own people. Sonia?
When I must be honest, I've watched the movie, I read the book, but it's been many years. I didn't have a chance to reread it for this. And my apologies for not participating so much, because I'm actually still working. So I'm sort of listening and working at the same time. But she kind of, Babette always struck me as being an illuminator in the sense that she kind of broke through some of those roles in the village. She kind of showed them a different way. So I guess that kind of speaks a little bit to your point, but not so much the male-female dynamic, but certainly the kind of more the way of life even though it's one feast, it has a way of sort of opening up their perspective.
Okay. Desiree, want to comment?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it before you mentioned it, Nita, but I think it's the reading is also maybe a commentary then to gender, because for 12 years she does do things the way apparently the priest were telling everyone to do. Like, she cooks this awful food for 12 years, never complains, never does anything other than what she's told to do. But the second she gets to decide as a woman and being true to her heritage and just doing things the way she feels is authentic and real and her, that's the moment she shines and she completely changes the whole society.
Yeah, but she doesn't use words, she uses food. And by the way, the years are different. I mean, in the Danish book, it's 65 years, and then it's 16 years. And I'm sorry, I wrote 6 in the questions. It's 16, and then it's 14 years, and then 30 years. And okay, so you could say maybe it's confusing that they didn't translate it right, but you could also say, why are these years necessary, and are they important? And I don't think they are. But it doesn't matter, but it takes her a long time. And just on a side note, I love øllebrød. If any of you have had øllebrød, I really, really like it. And here it is disparaged as the worst kind of food. Yes, it is tasteless, but very solid. And if you grow up with it, you probably like it. So, okay, let's talk about food. And here's my big question to all of you. Can food transform us? Can food actually do what Karen Blixen is explaining that it does here in Babette's Feast?
I do think that food can transform us. And I think that food can make us feel healthier. It can make us feel stronger. It can bring us connections with where the food came from or who prepared it for us. And in the feast, as she's preparing for the feast, it seemed, and I read this too, so it's not my own thought to begin with, but that the feast was like a sacrifice in a sense. And she was sacrificing animals. She was, or slaughtering animals, or, butchering them, preparing them for the feast. And I think through that process, she, I do think that people may have felt transformed, because by the end of the feast, they were satiated. They were, they didn't realize that they liked that type of food. And they seemed to be very pleased and kind of in awe of her skill, which she didn't just acquire making those boring meals for the sisters. She already had those skills when I think she was in Paris. So yeah, I don't know. I do think that that it can really be a restorative experience. And I felt that it wasn't for her. I'm not sure if it was, but it didn't feel like that to me. It felt like she'd done everything that she could with the money that she had, with the francs that she had gotten through the lottery. And then it felt to me like her life was just going to continue in the way that it had prior to this. So I know I covered a lot of topics there, but I do think food can be transformative.
I think there is a message there in that Babette was taken in as a refugee, a waif, with no one to be with or anything else. No questions asked. She served in a serve out, quietly in the background, and did a thing. And she, in a way, when you read the book, she was cooking for I can't pronounce his name, but the guy who had actually tasted the food before. I mean, he really appreciated everything she did. But at the end of the book, the very end of the book, she still says, I want to stay and live here. I don't want to go anywhere else. So there is a message in as much as Babette comes in at the very beginning of the book, and she still wants to stay there regardless. And she doesn't really take part in any of the religious side of the book.
Mm-hmm. But Lars, do you think that she has chosen to stay there, or has chosen to make this dinner, which made it impossible for her to go anywhere else because she used all her money?
I think she was quite happy to stay there. She has nowhere else to go. The people she knew were all the people in the village there. Everyone she knew in France, if she could even go there because of the conditions, everyone there was dead or gone. She had nothing to go back there for. Her life was now in Norwegian fishing village.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, what about? Okay, I was just. Oh, I'm sorry.
And Norsk Hilleberg is different from Hilleberg because it's got beer in it.
Hilleberg has beer in it if you put it in, but it's the meldøl. So yeah, but anyway, no. But I was going to say that I talked about words. Nobody praised her art. Nobody praised her art. So could she, be elevated herself, like we were talking about, when nobody has told her? The sisters go out and they say, yeah, it really was a very good meal, thank you. And that was it. And Løvehjelm knows what he's getting. So I think, oh, I'm sorry, there was an echo. So I think that that's also a very interesting thing. She's not getting the recognition she would love to, but she gets it in her own heart. Is that sufficient? Is that good enough for an artist? Is that ending satisfactory? That she says, I want to be the greatest artist there is, and that's what I was. Oh, we all say, yeah, but really it was only one person who recognized that you were, and the rest of them were looking for the turtle. So, what's going on here? Sandra.
What I would say is that she definitely negated that clearly. And she said, it doesn't really matter what all of you thought. What mattered was that I was able to take my craft to the nth degree that I wanted to take it to. And that fulfilled her. So yeah, that really resonated with me. How about the rest of you?
Otto?
Yeah, I think that, can you hear me, by the way?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay. I have a lot of noise in the house here, so I'm doing it in a little bit different way. I think it raises that question, what do you do with a great gift? Whether it's a material gift or whether it's a gift of singing or prophecy or whatever it is. And it looks like Babette does it not for anybody else but herself, and is greatly rewarded with that, and actually can perpetuate the stay, because she still knows who she is. Her identity has not changed over those 15 or whatever 16 years she's been there. She is still who she is. Mm-hmm. And she has owned herself. She does continue to do that. And she's encouraging everyone else to stay in that example that she's giving others here.
Okay. And we have Yara and then commenting. Yara?
Yeah, that's my first attendance. So you don't know. Yeah, I read Babette's guest book, and when I was taking 92 at the university, and I had seen the movie before, and I had the pleasure to read both in Danish and in English, and it always resonated with me that how beautifully written it was in the two different languages, because she didn't translate, right? But I think this thing of the artist that just stays with me. I don't need anybody, is my self-fulfillment. I think it's also reflects a little bit of Karen Blixen's selfish personality, that she was a little bit, yeah, I had a farm in Africa. I was the one, I'm the person who does things, and it doesn't matter what I do, it's good enough for me. So it doesn't really matter. I'm fulfilled. I did what I do best. I do what I like to do. And it's not because I'm being nice and trying to give to those people something that they're used to, or a feast or a dinner in their terms. I'm going to do on my terms. That was my take on it.
No, that's it. That's a very good point. Lori, you took your hand down.
Well, Yara really hit the big point of what I was going to say. I think Blixen wrote this at the end of her life, and she was
no, 18. She actually wrote it in 1950. Oh, not 18. 1950.
And she died in 62.
Yeah.
Right. And was she back in Denmark when she wrote this?
Yes. She came back to Denmark in 1932 or something like that. Yeah.
So can we see Babette as Karen Blixen, in that she's come from what most Danes would consider, I imagine, an exotic place, you know, and a place of more light and color and variety, with a strong class system. And it's interesting because if she is Babette, if she is seeing a part of herself in Babette, then she's putting herself in sort of the working class. And maybe in part of her time in, you know, as the giant colonizer in Kenya, she felt that she was actually more of the people, but had all of these other rich aristocratic jackasses around her. But yeah, and it's like to me, she was saying, I'm creating, and that's good enough. I am creating, and she didn't need people to say this is amazing. She knew it was good, and Blixen knew she was a good writer. And if you know, so yeah, I just wouldn't. Yara said it better.
Because you didn't say that, but Yara said selfish. I mean, selfish. Is it selfish then to want to share your art? I mean, it can be anything, music, words, food, with others so that they benefit and they really feel elevated and almost saved. So that's an interesting question. That is the power of art. And I'll be quiet. And Yara, did you want to continue, or are you done?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure. I think Karen Blixen had a relationship with the food. She was snobbish in a way that it was always champagne and caviar. And for breakfast, and that's all she ate. And she always made sure everybody knew about that. And I think Babette's, dinner has a little bit of that. I'm making something that nobody has clue what it is and wouldn't appreciate, but it's my own thing. It's my own art.
And we need to remember that she does put Lawrence Löwenhjelm in there. So we all know that it's Kayan Sarcophage, Dinis Demido, and all these. Otherwise, we would not know. And we would not know it was a Veuve Clicquot, or that she was drinking and serving and so on. So yeah, Inga?
Just wanted to make the point that I view the theme, one of the themes of the book is Karen Blixen making a statement about Danish society, that the Danish society represented for her the Philistines, the ones who would eschew a high culture and greatness and art and literature that she represented the finer things in life, and that was anyway. I think it was actually kind of a negative statement towards the Danish society. But I do want to say just one little tidbit from that region in Denmark, which I always found very fascinating. I went to the museum in Vorupør, which is just south of Klitmøller, and the Indre Mission really saved the people out there. So while I too find that religion very harsh, and the sailors were all drinking up all the proceeds, and it was only sand out there, and they were all the women and children were quite hungry, and the religion came in and sort of kept the men from drinking up the proceeds. So another aspect of, yeah, that I think Karen Blixen's point was completely different than that one.
Yes, and there is a contemporary author, Maria Hilleberg, who has written Kvinderne fra Thy. So if you want to read more about the harsh conditions and what intermission can do to people, then that is an absolutely wonderful book. And I can give Lena the title, and she can send it out too. Tracy first, and then Sandra. Yeah.
Yes. I think for me, it's interesting to find out everyone else's take on it, because I think everyone just comes to it with so many different viewpoints and life experiences. So it's been really fun as my first book club in the Danish community here. But I love the concept of gifts, like for the sisters to choose what they want for their lives and to operate within their gifts, and Babette at the end really needing to not just be the servant, but to operate in her gifts too. And then I felt like there's a theme, I put it in the chat about temptation, that what is temptation for some people is not temptation for other people, and all the choices within that I found I'm going to be thinking on that one for a while.
Yeah, that's good. Linda? Oh, Linda, you're not, okay, try again. You're muted.
Am I okay now?
Yes, I think you are. Try again. Now you're muted again. No, I can't hear you.
Can you
Okay,
hear
try
me?
again. Yes, now.
Okay, following the strand of temptation, was it temptation that brought the secrets of the antagonized people over the years into friendship? Do you know what I mean? They had problems with each other, yet through eating the food, did the essence of the temptation of the food yet be transformed into love? And that was very, yeah, it was temptation, but not temptation as an evil. You know what I mean? The end was something very lovely. So I thought about temptation as the speaker before brought to the group.
And that's a good point, that yes, they are tempted because they've never had anything but water. And all of a sudden they find themselves being drunk. And of course, she's very subtle about this. Ooh, the snow was so heavy that nobody woke up until mid-afternoon. And that, of course, was because of the snow and not because they were all hung over. I mean, she does a great job there. So is that in defense of alcohol? Are we all going to go down and have a glass after this book club and say, oh, okay, now let's be elevated? Or is that just an aside to the fact that art and the great artist can also be, well, perceived in food and drink and the perfect combination? So is it, of course, and this is going to be kind of my last question, do you see this as a happy ending? Let me be the devil's advocate. She is a refugee. She is an immigrant. She never will be one of the community there. She has a gift that she is allowed to explore once, and that's it. On the other hand, we have those happy, childlike people who have now solved all their conflicts and who are walking home hand in hand, and once again, brother, brother, sister, sister, and who feel that, okay, the sky, heaven is getting closer every night. So my final question to you is it a happy ending? How do you see the ending? Yes, Debbie?
I think the fact that she got to offer her gift and to work hard and to see it all enjoyed as much as they were allowing themselves to enjoy it. I think it's a happy ending that she now feels like she had done it for fame and fortune and notoriety, but now she did it just out of the goodness of her heart, out of the love that she had in her heart for these people who had nothing but gave her what she needed to survive. And I think for her, it was a happy ending.
I don't think there is an ending. Well, there's an ending to what we read, but life goes on, and I think it was Lars that said this is something about immigration too, that you come from another culture and you bring your skills, and they are not recognized for a long time. You have the lowest paying jobs and da 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 da. But eventually, you know, the integration does happen, and even in a society like Denmark, I believe it'll still happen in Denmark as well. I live in Canada, so you know, I have a little bit of experience with how it's possible for these cultures to mix and blend and come up with a good result.
Linda, Yara, you have your hands up? Yeah.
Yeah, I see it as a continuing. Like Otto said, I see it as a continuing. And even a story such as this, which is, you know, clearly written quite a while ago. Yes, he is in Canada, and there is a blending of people coming in. And with that, you get the richness of all the exotic restaurants. And Babette was an enrichment of an exotic experience for this small community. So I consider it, why not definitively happy or unhappy, but a continuing of life. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I also loved, there's one part I really loved, that when Babette entered into the household, all of a sudden they had more money and the food tasted better. And she was also great at doing that, you know, kind of the household budget. She is a woman of many, many talents. Yeah. Lynn?
I was going to say that something to that effect is that I think that she, while she was a servant, she really wasn't exactly a servant. I might have missed this because I read the Danish, but it said something in the beginning about the other tradespeople in the village respected her, and when she came to buy things, and that, you know, they didn't get away with anything, and she dealt with them, you know, from a strong position. And when at one point the sisters all of a sudden thought of her going back to Paris, and they all of a sudden thought about what their house was like without her. And so I think that she was actually in a much stronger position than just a servant in this household. She had held her own all those years, no matter what.
You know what? I think that you all emphasize the fact that there is no ending to this story, that it's a story that stays with you and that keeps, you know, makes you keep thinking. Sandra, would you like to have the last word? You are muted, dear. All right.
Do you guys remember when they first introduced her and they said that she was going to be, you know, she basically, what happened in the end is that she pervaded all of their, well, okay, so these two gals thought themselves to be so godly, and I'm sure they were, but having Babette in their house raised the standard for them of how they had to behave. I think that carried through the whole story, if you guys agree with me.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible to see her as a Jesus figure, as a savior. I mean, taking into consideration that she's a lot older than 33, but I mean, that's still where you can see her. We have to stop, everybody, but this is, like I said, it's a story that goes on. And if you haven't read anything else by Karen Blixen, do read some other of her novellas, which means just a short little story. That's actually the definition. And please come back, even though we have a long book next time. I love hearing from everybody. I'd love to see you again. Debbie? You are.
I wanted to mention that I am so excited about the book that you chose for next time, because I was introduced to it from a friend who sailed over on Draken, the Norwegian Viking ship that was built in 2010. And so, of course, I met her in the sailing world. And she said to me when she learned that I was Danish, that her favorite book was a Danish book. And it just blew my mind because she didn't speak another language than English. And she told me about this book. And I read it, and there are several parts that I would love to discuss and unpack. And I think you're right. I think it travels through all these generations, and there's so much to unpack. And Ærø is one of my favorite places in the world anyway. So, and it is a long, long book. And I want to mention that it is available on Audible, because when it's a long book, I don't know what your date is for the next meeting, but it's a long.
I should tell you that. I've got it right here, ready. January 18th, everybody, January 18th. So may I finish today by wishing you all a wonderful Christmas, very merry, and let's all hope for a wonderful new year with a lot less COVID. And Desiree will have one more announcement.
I just wanted to say that my interview with Carsten Jensen, the writer of the next book we're reading, is January 4th. So if anyone has questions they would like me to put forward, please let me know before January 4th. That's your chance to ask him directly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I love seeing your faces, hearing your voices. Hope to see you again. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
God jul.
God jul.
God jul.
Glædelig jul, Linda.